Why rely on big tech for your communication when their values oppose your faith? Fide offers private, ad-free email built by and for Catholics. Most of you know Fide for email. And soon, they're launching Fide Chat, a fully end-to-end encrypted messaging app, perfect for Catholic families and groups. Sign up for fide.email today and you'll receive lifetime pricing for Fide Chat when it launches later this summer. Join Fide today. You don't have to compromise your faith for technology. The month of June, we know, is given over to the celebration of the first deadly sin. But if you have any sense of awareness at all, the people who celebrate the first deadly sin also have celebrations throughout the year because they must always be the center of attention. They must always gaslight you into becoming so numb that you just ignore their pervasive sin that they promote to everybody, and including and especially the most young and the most vulnerable. A story that I broke here late last year of a celebration scheduled for St. Peter's Basilica, a Jubilee pilgrimage for James Martin types. The backlash from that story breaking all across the internet, and then, of course, into the real world, was that the Vatican backed down and canceled it. It's now back. And some have been trying to defend it, saying, well, you know, it's not officially a church function. As you're going to see, there's going to be a mass offered for them in the Vatican, which means, yes, it's a church function. Anybody who has even the most basic level of understanding of how things happen in Rome knows that to say a mass in Vatican requires you pretty much to get some kind of official permission. So let's go back to LifeSite's report from late last year. By the way, if you hadn't heard, John Henry Weston is back at LifeSite, and he's posted something on social media yesterday saying there was big news about LifeSite coming. We'll find out together. This is the original report from late last year. On December 18th, which is a Marian feast day on the old calendar. That's when this broke. Under the headline, Vatican quietly returns James Martin type Jubilee pilgrimage to official calendar. On September 6th, the pilgrimage to the Holy Door of St. Peter's Basilica will take place for the Jonathan's Tent Association and other groups. The Tendi di Giornata is one of the most prominent James Martin type Catholic organizations in all of Italy. And we'll talk about that in a second. So yes, started under Francis. Removed from the calendar, now it's back. And one of the groups, one of the most notorious groups in the English-speaking world is one advertising this now. We'll be talking about their reporting on this in just a moment. But it's back. Because, of course, it is. Things don't change. So here's the article. Quote, after a scandal and contradictory statements from the Vatican, and a James Martin type specific pilgrimage is now back in the official calendar of the 2025 Jubilee events. On December 17th, a listing for one of the many events taking place during the 2025 Jubilee year was quietly reset in the official calendar online. On September 6th, the pilgrimage to the Holy Door of St. Peter's Basilica will take place for the Jonathan Tents Association and other groups. The association, known by its original Italian name, is one of the most prominent of these kinds of so-called Catholic organizations in Italy. Significant controversy broke out about the pilgrimage after it was first reported by Il Messaggero on December 6th. The Italian outlet had revealed that a special moment of spirituality has been included in the official calendar of the Holy Year on September 6th, and the historic Baroque Church of the Gesù has become the promoter of the welcoming James Martin type pilgrims, their parents, workers, and all those who gravitate to these colorful associations. The pilgrimage was named Church, Home for All James Martin type Christians and Other Existential Frontiers. Existential Frontiers, okay. This group is, as a group, quote, aimed at making known the path that these James Martin types take every day in their communities and their various churches. The group looks to present tales of their experiences so that they can, quote, help society and the churches to open up to the understanding and reception of these people. In other words, the church needs to change. You ever noticed it's not about individuals abandoning sin in their lives? It's about the church needing to abandon sin. And there have been times in history where reformers would bring a message that the body of Christ, the faithful, need to repent and on a large scale abandon sin and turn to God. But that's not like this, though, because we're talking about unequivocally defined sins right in Scripture. Okay? That's what we're talking about. And it's apparently the magisterium that's wrong, because if the church has to change on something that's been constantly taught since time immemorial, then the church is the one who has to constantly is the one who's wrong and has to change. Nola with the using member for 47 months. I appreciate that. And using the free monthly super chat. If you are supporting any YouTube channel, on that channel in live streams, you can get a free super chat once a month. Use it. You're paying for it. Nolo says, you're right. The face of the church will be lavender. That's one of the things I was afraid of going into the conclave, that the synodality will have a James Martin face, was what I used to say. Should bring that phrase back. Here's the latest update from New Ways Ministry. Posted July 22nd, and it flew under the radar because most rational Catholics don't really want to go to New Ways Ministry very often. But here's their headline. Why don't we, James Martin type Catholics, prepare for their Jubilee pilgrimage? Now, if you're not familiar with New Ways Ministry, they are one of the most notorious of these organizations in North America. They have a history going back to the 1970s. They were founded by a dissident priest and a dissident nun who promoted heresy and were told by bishops all across the country they had to stop what they were doing and all this other things. They ignored it for 50 years. And then the nun became pen pals with Pope Francis. And I'm not even joking about that. She even posts letters he'd write to her. It's in clearly his handwriting. If you've seen his handwriting before, she had selfies taken with him during the synod. I mean, it was all over the place towards the end. And now this is their announcement of their Jubilee. 2025 is a Jubilee year, a major Catholic event held every 25 years that brings people from all over the world to Rome to pray, pass through the holy doors of selected churches, and take part in other spiritual activities to renew their faith. And this year, James Martin type Catholics want to be an organized part of the Jubilee. For the first time in church history, James Martin type Catholics are getting ready to participate in the Jubilee, not in spite of their strangeness, but through it. On September 6th, they will gather for a prayer vigil and walk in prayer as a pilgrimage to St. Peter's Basilica, sharing their identities and their faith. Now you have to understand, for the crowd we're talking about, their inclinations, their unnatural, disordered inclinations are core to their very identity. They don't take the disordered things in their lives that were given to them as a cross to carry in this life. We all have something, right? And they have a very particular thing. They don't take those things and treat it as a cross to walk in the footsteps of God and walk with Christ, carrying that cross. And if they stumble, staying close to the sacraments, to live as Catholics are supposed to live. There are Catholics with those inclinations, but they certainly don't identify themselves with these multi-letter acronyms here, and they certainly don't demand the church change her teachings on this. Instead, they submit themselves to the church's timeless teachings, and it's kind of the major difference between these groups. Let's continue, though. The event is being organized by Jonathan's Tent, an Italian such organization, and is being co-sponsored by many other Catholic-type, James Martin-type groups around the globe, including New Ways Ministry. These believers want to pray and reflect with the church, offering their experience of faith. There's your modernist language. Those who've been following along for quite a while now, right out of Pope Pius X's encyclical that defines the heresy of modernism, is this thing called vital immanence, which is essentially the experience of faith of each individual believer. And when you share in a dialogue and accompanying process with each other, dare I say a synodal process, you will get to the truth of what faith is by sharing your lived experience. That's what they're doing here. And their strange lives as a path to encounter God. I spoke with one of the leaders of the group and an organizer of the pilgrimage to understand the spirit behind this initiative and how the community is preparing to walk together in faith. They ask, how did this come about? And they say, it came about in 2024 in Bologna during a meal at Via San Giuseppe, a Jesuit retreat center. It's always the Jesuits, folks. We were at the end of a weekend retreat for these pastoral workers. At some point, I just said, everyone has a Jubilee, why don't we? Then we realized we wanted to express our joy, to give thanks to the Lord for what we've lived, and to pray for what is yet to come. So we wrote a letter to the Vatican's Jubilee Secretariat office. Their affirmative reply came at the end of that summer, and from that moment, we began to prepare our Jubilee. So there again is a claim being made that this is not an official Vatican function. We wrote a letter to the Vatican's Jubilee Secretariat office. Their affirmative reply, meaning they approved of it, came at the end of the summer. That's when they began preparing. This is approved by the Vatican. Right there in what they're saying publicly here. We tried to involve all these type of Christian groups, both nationally and internationally. The idea was twofold. On the one hand, to build a community. On the other, to show the church that these groups exist and have been active for years. We didn't expect such a huge response. We received over 1,000 registrations, mostly from Italy, but also from countries like the USA, Brazil, and Ghana. At one point, this James Martin-type Jubilee event was concluded in the Vatican's official Jubilee calendar, but then it was removed. The removal raised doubts about the real intentions of the Jubilee Secretariat. At that point, Pope Francis's support for the initiative was vital. Thanks to his intervention, we were able to continue with serenity. And this again, what they're saying now, July 22nd, 2025. Read between the lines on that. They have approval, folks, from the Vatican office responsible for such things. Curious what you think of this. Let me know in the comments. It's back, September 6th, which is 6 weeks from now, give or take. Pray for everybody involved in this. Pray that the Pope will intervene and cancel the event. We'll see what happens. I expect fully that you're going to see this pilgrimage happen with the Mass happening in the Vatican, all organized through that Jubilee office. When this story initially broke last fall, it caused an international scandal. They took it off the calendar to placate people, but they never canceled the event. And they got help in the programming of this event through the Vatican's official office for such things related to the Jubilee year. Now we will go to an update on something I reported yesterday. You may recall that Dr. Ralph Martin and Eduardo Echeverria of the seminary up in Detroit. These are two very high-profile Catholics. Have shows on EWTN or on radio shows, write books for popular consumption. They are theologians who work in a seminary and who train priests in the Catholic faith. Neither of these men are what you would call hardline traditionalists. They're fairly conservative, but very mainstream in their opinions about things like the liturgy and Vatican II and the hermeneutic of continuity and all these other things. You'll recall they were canceled by the new bishop, Archbishop Weissenberger of Detroit, who has, if you do a little digging in his history, has a long history of supporting James Martin type events, James Martin activities, and all sorts of other things where he plays fast and loose with Catholic morality. We have an update here, and it's not the kind that I like giving, but here we go. This comes from X, posted on his personal account by Dr. Edward Peters. My Sacred Heart Major Seminary teaching contract was terminated by Archbishop Weissenberger this week. I have retained counsel. That means he's got a lawyer. Except to offer my prayers for those affected by this news and to ask for theirs in return, I have no further comment at this time. He even signed his own post. Dr. Edward Peters, who is a canon lawyer. And so please pray for him. And this process, he says here, I have retained counsel, meaning he has a lawyer. That is 3 of these men who have been terminated there for the high crime of teaching the Catholic faith in a way that's identifiably Catholic to men who are going to be priests. You might expect that the response to this has been something else entirely. So we go here, Dr. Edward Feeser, who is he is himself a professor of philosophy, Thomist. Posted this in response on X. He says, what is being done to Ed Peters, Ralph Martin, and Eduardo Echeverria is an outrage. This looks like a Saturday Night Massacre style purge of those faithful to the tradition of the church. And there are some other responses that I won't show you, including one from Mike Lewis of Where Peter Is. gloating over their termination. Remember, traditionalists are the bad ones. We're the bad ones, not the people who gloat over conservative people who accept the post-conciliar reforms, but who want everything, who try to teach Catholic things, getting fired. We're all the troubled ones, not guys like, not people who gloat over others losing their jobs. I wouldn't even gloat over Mike Lewis losing his job if he was able to lose a job right now. I wouldn't do it. But that's just where we are. Eric Salmons posted this also. Crisis Magazine. Find him online on numerous places. He says he has just heard from a source of his that Ed Peters, the first American to be appointed to the Apostolic Signatura, has also been fired from Sacred Heart Seminary. If this is true, then it clearly means there's a purge of faithful professors from the seminary. Diabolical. All being done by Archbishop Edward Weissenberger. Why? Simple. I can tell you exactly why. Because we're in the consolidation phase now of synodality. The synodal process is about change, implementing permanent change through dialogue, through those mechanisms described by Pope Pius X as part of the heresy of modernism, through this dialogue accompaniment process about the personal lived experience of faith. And part of that is you can't have hardline teachings on contraception, marriage, all the rest of it. Recall, Dr. Ralph Martin got in trouble because he pointed out that under Francis, he started having a lot of ambiguities about things like holy matrimony and morality of the flesh and other things, and that this ambiguity leads souls astray. Now he's fired. That's where we are. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't give credit where it was due. Viewer of this channel, Rod Halverson, posted this on X. Basically saying here is something everyone is missing, is that Dr. Swendens, one of the people at Vatican II, joyfully called Vatican II the French Revolution in the Church. He actually called it that in a positive way. As such, as follow the exact same process as all such revolutions. And basically saying is, it's time for conservative Catholics who are fine with the Novus Ordo, fine with Vatican II itself. We all got to start working together with traditionalists and conservatives and people in between need to start working together, because at the end of the day, every revolution follows the same true revolution. Every real revolution. Go look at 1917 or France. Go look at those. And they always go the same way. After you have a revolution, the new order of things breaks into two factions, and those two factions may be several factions working as a coalitions together, but there are two factions. Kind of a left-wing one and kind of a right-wing one. That's where the left and right comes from, the post-French Revolution order of things. And typically after a revolution, they consolidate their power by getting rid of first the old order, the remnants of the old order, as your traditionalists today. But then the progressive types get control and they start going after their former allies, or they're just people who are too rigid. You saw that in the French Revolution. Eventually, he says, revolutions eat their own. And I'm not saying Dr. Ralph Martin or, Ed Peters or any of them are revolutionaries. But they support the official hermeneutic of continuity understanding of Vatican II. And Francis got rid of the hermeneutic of continuity. He did. He chastised people who used it. He said Vatican II is being fully implemented by the Synod on Synodality. Once you get rid of that hermeneutic of continuity, you've got a problem, a very real one. That's why they keep using the language of the new synodal church. We saw Cardinal Hollerich use that language all the time. Cardinal Gresh, the two men running the synod. You had Cardinal Roach even talk about how the traditional Mass, the pre-Vatican II Mass, was not compatible with the new ecclesiology of the Church after Vatican II. Ecclesiology being a fancy term meaning the theology of the Church. Its relationship to the world, its relationship to humanity, its relationship to God. All those things changed fundamentally at Vatican II, according to these men. These are revolutionary men. Now, whether the church's ecclesiology changed. At Vatican II, I'll leave that to more traditionally minded theologian who can give you a good argument for that. But it's clear these men believe that. So it's time, I think, for the bickering among people who just want Catholicism. We can debate what that actually means, but maybe we should lay aside the internal bickering, because they are going in the process now of consolidating their power. And that means getting rid of everybody who had been, like, just 2 weeks ago, been fine in the establishment of things, but who have too much of an old order view of things. They're getting rid of them. And it's unfortunate. None of those men are bad men. They're all good men. They all care about the salvation of souls. It's what you would want from laymen who work in a seminary, who teach priests how to be priests. It's what you would want. There's a real care for souls. Curious what you think about all this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on the social media helps a lot too. Pray for everybody we spoke about today, including Archbishop Weissenberger. I'm not trying to make you mad at him. He's doing a really good job doing that all on his own. Pray for Dr. Ed Peters, Dr. Ralph Martin, Dr. Eduardo Echeverria. They will need it. They're all men with families now looking at unemployment. I don't think they'll have a hard time finding work, but it depends on how far that consolidation has gone. Because it could end up being that a memo has gone out to the other seminaries telling them, get with the program. We'll find out all together. I don't think we've heard the end of this story. And as always, I pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.